There it is. Okay, so when you see this, what would you think to do a topic on? So there's quantum, there's soul. So I thought quantum, that's kind of a sciencey term. The soul, less so. So let's mix it together and see what happens. What happens when we combine science with the soul? So first, what is the soul? Well, or why people, who knows what a soul is, right? But people feel like they have one, even if they don't know what it is. Like the idea is that it feels like there's something driving your body. Like you aren't your body, you are in your body. And that thing that you are is the soul, and the body is this other thing. And then when you die, the body stays here and decomposes and gets gross, but your soul remains intact and goes on to the afterlife, which is another fantastic reason to have a soul, or else you can't go to the afterlife. And also, it's very poetic. Anyone who's ever been in love, they know what it means to have a soulmate, even if you don't have a soul. So, question is, the science of it, do we actually have a soul? Well, maybe, maybe not. The current major hypothesis, or the current views of science, is that the mind, what we feel is the soul, your consciousness even, is just what your brain does. So people have said it better, which is that the mind is what the brain does. So it's hard for us to be able to look objectively on our consciousness and realize it's just the brain doing stuff, because we are that thing that's looking back. So you can't really take a step back. But there's other ways for us to figure out exactly what's going on. So we've seen that different parts of the brain lead to different parts of the mind. If you shut off one part of the brain, you shut off one part of the mind. We do a lot of crazy studies with implanting wires in the brain. You can control things. You can even induce people to have different emotions, make them laugh spontaneously, which is really cool. So that's one reason why we would think that consciousness is purely made by the mind, or mind is purely made by the brain. Another thing is we see that brain activity leads to mind activity. They've even done studies. Oh, this is really distracting. So we've seen we can do a study where they say there's a red button there, push the red button whenever you want. No time limit. It's not a game. And the person there is thinking what kind of stupid science experiment is this? I just have to push a button. What's going to happen? So what they did was they monitored the brain activity, and they saw there was a spike in the brain activity before they decided to push the button. So basically, the people would say they would wait until they decide to push the button and then push right away. But that spike in brain activity preceded them thinking, okay, now I'm going to push the button. So it's like the brain is driving their consciousness before they realize it, which is very weird. And then we can see that as the brain develops, so does the mind. And it kind of correlates quite well. Where the more synapses you have, the more active the mind is. And it decays, like with Alzheimer's, which is very sad. When the brain is basically falling apart and the synapses stop firing, the mind falls apart and it gets very disturbing. And then also, you can't have a mind without a brain. But you can have a brain without a mind. So causality, brain causes mind. So that's just very basic. So there's been some scientific research into actually finding the soul, looking deep into it, see if there's a soul. So there's a scientist in 1907 who weighed people as they died in the hopes that the second they died, their soul would leave and the body would get lighter and would tip the scale. And in the first trial that he ran, it measured to 21 grams. And there's a movie titled that based on this experiment. But it wasn't really about the experiment, so it was really disappointing. So the guy ran it a bunch of times, always got a different weight. No one's ever been able to repeat it. There's a gazillion confounding factors that can cause weight change when someone dies, like exhaling hair, blood settling or moving away from the skin, causing heat loss or heat gain. It's all really complicated. But basically, it was a promising start, but it just didn't go anywhere. And also, why would the soul have a weight? I don't know. It's a good guess, though. People have near-death experiences where, they have a cardiac episode and they almost died, but then they got resuscitated by somebody. And then they report that when they were out, they had this experience like feeling warm or seeing a tunnel of light, which would make you think, well, maybe the soul is leaving and maybe you are going towards the afterlife. But what it probably is just a lack of oxygen going to your brain. And they've actually been able to replicate this in labs. So the simplest explanation is probably just brain damage. Temporary, perhaps. Another experience that people have, which would lead you to think that maybe there is a soul, is the out-of-body experience, where people can sometimes report hovering above their body and looking down. And this can happen in hospitals when you're going where someone has a trauma event, or when someone's had a lot of LSD, perhaps, and had a lot of fun. You can have out-of-body experiences. And it apparently is very cool. And they've studied this in a couple ways. The first way they studied it is they actually would have things in hospital rooms that you can only see from above. So the person in the bed would never be able to see it. And they would ask them after they came back, and if they reported having an out-of-body experience, they'd say, well, did you see that picture that was pointing upwards at the ceiling? And unfortunately, no one's ever been able to report anything that they couldn't see in the room from their sitting position, which is unfortunate. Another way they've studied it is they've actually been able to induce out-of-body experiences with people. This picture here is from an experiment where basically you wear these VR goggles that shows a projection of you in front of you. So like there's a camera behind you that's looking at you, and then you put the VR goggles on and you can see yourself basically in front of you at the same distance. And then they do experiments where like they poke you or pretend to poke you, and then it all of a sudden you separate from the body and it feels like it's happening to someone else, but to you. It's really cool. So, question is this the end? I don't know. Do we go on? Do we die? It's the end. The end of